It was a typical Friday night when Sarah, 13, invited her best friends, Emma and Chloe, for a sleepover. Her parents were out of town for the weekend, leaving the girls alone in the house. Sarah's older brother, Mike, was supposed to be home, but he had left for a party, promising to return by midnight. The house felt eerily quiet, but the girls were too excited to care. They set up their sleeping bags in the living room, surrounded by snacks and horror movies. After watching a particularly terrifying movie, they decided to explore the house. Sarah's family had just moved in a few months ago, and there were still some rooms and spaces they hadn't checked out, including the attic. "Let's go up to the attic," Sarah suggested, her voice trembling with both fear and excitement. Emma and Chloe hesitated, but eventually agreed. They found the attic entrance in the hallway, a small hatch in the ceiling with a pull-down ladder. Sarah grabbed a flashlight, and they made their way up one by one with Sarah leading the way. The attic was dark and musty, filled with old furniture, boxes, and cobwebs. The flashlight beam danced across the room, revealing dusty corners and forgotten memories. As they explored, they found an old trunk in the corner, covered in dust and seemingly untouched for years. "Do you think we should open it?" Chloe asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why not? It's probably just full of old junk," Sarah replied, trying to sound brave. Emma, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "I have a bad feeling about this." Ignoring her, Sarah unlatched the trunk and opened it. Inside, they found old photographs, letters, and strange trinkets. Among the items was a small, ornate box. Sarah picked it up and opened it, revealing a tarnished silver locket. As she held the locket, the temperature in the attic seemed to drop. The girls shivered, and Emma's bad feeling intensified. "Let's get out of here," she urged. Suddenly, they heard a soft creaking noise. They turned to see the attic door slowly closing on its own. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. The flashlight flickered and then went out, plunging them into darkness. "Sarah, what's happening?" Chloe cried, her voice shaking. "I don't know," Sarah replied, fumbling to turn the flashlight back on. When it finally illuminated the room again, they saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner, its eyes glowing a menacing red. The girls screamed and huddled together. The figure moved closer, its footsteps echoing in the silent attic. Sarah, clutching the locket, felt a strange sensation, like something was trying to communicate with her. She heard a faint whisper in her ear, telling her to leave the attic and never come back. Gathering all her courage, Sarah spoke to the figure. "We're leaving! We don't mean any harm!" She threw the locket back into the trunk, and the shadowy figure seemed to pause. The attic door creaked open, and the girls didn't wait for another sign. They scrambled down the ladder and ran to the living room, slamming the attic door shut behind them. They could still hear faint whispers and footsteps above, but they didn't dare go back. Just as they were catching their breath, Mike walked in, looking confused. "What's going on? Why do you all look like you've seen a ghost?" The girls quickly told him what happened, and Mike, skeptical but concerned, went to check the attic. When he returned, he looked pale. "There's nothing up there, but the locket is gone. You girls weren't imagining things." The rest of the night was tense, and they huddled together in the living room, trying to sleep but too scared to close their eyes. The next morning, Sarah's parents returned, and they told them everything. Her parents dismissed it as overactive imaginations, but Sarah knew better. The attic was never mentioned again, and the locket remained a chilling memory of a night that turned into a nightmare. It was the middle of October, and the chill of fall had settled into the small town of Pine Hill. 14-year-old Max had invited his friends, Luke and Jake, over for a sleepover to celebrate his birthday. Max's parents had gone out for dinner, leaving the boys alone in the house. They decided to make the most of their freedom by playing video games and telling ghost stories. After a few rounds of intense gaming, boys settled down in the living room with bowls of popcorn and soda. Luke, always the thrill seeker, suggested they explore the abandoned house next door. It had been empty for years, and rumors about it being haunted had only grown over time. "Come on, guys, it's now or never. We need to see if those stories are true," Luke urged, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Max and Jake exchanged uneasy glances, but eventually agreed. They grabbed their flashlights and headed out, the cool night air sending shivers down their spines. The old house loomed in the darkness, its windows like empty eyes watching their every move. As they approached the front door, it creaked open on its own. Max hesitated, but Luke pushed forward, his curiosity overpowering his fear. The boys stepped inside, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air inside was stale and thick with dust, and the floorboards creaked with every step. "Let's check out the basement," Jake suggested, pointing to a door at the end of the hallway. The others nodded, and they made their way down the narrow staircase. The basement was even darker and colder, filled with old furniture and forgotten relics. As they explored, they heard a faint tapping sound. It grew louder, echoing through the basement. Max's heart pounded in his chest. "Did you guys hear that?" "Yeah, but it's probably just the wind," Luke said, though he didn't sound convinced. The tapping continued, now accompanied by a soft whispering. The boys followed the sounds to a corner of the basement where an old wardrobe stood. Luke, ever the brave one, opened the wardrobe, revealing nothing but old coats and moth-eaten blankets. "See? Nothing to worry about," Luke said. But just as he turned to leave, the wardrobe door slammed shut on its own. The boys jumped back, their flashlights flickering. "Okay, that's enough. Let's get out of here," Max said, his voice shaking. They hurried back upstairs, but as they reached the living room, they noticed something strange. A light was on in the kitchen. Max knew they had left all the lights off before leaving the house. They crept towards the kitchen, peeking around the corner. There, sitting at the table, was a man in old-fashioned clothes, staring blankly ahead. "Who are you?" Max demanded, trying to sound brave. The man slowly turned to face them, his eyes hollow and empty. "I've been waiting for you," he said in a monotone voice. The boys bolted out of the house, not stopping until they were safely back in Max's living room. They locked the doors and windows, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. "What was that?" Jake exclaimed, his face pale. "No idea, but we are never going back there," Max replied. As they tried to calm down, they heard a knock on the front door. They froze, their hearts racing. Max cautiously approached the door and peered through the peephole. Standing on the porch was their neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who lived a few houses down. "Is everything all right, boys?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Max opened the door and explained what had happened. Mrs. Thompson's face grew serious. "That house has a dark history. The man you saw is believed to be Mr. Whitaker, the original owner. He disappeared without a trace many years ago, and some say his spirit still haunts the place, looking for someone to help him find peace." The boys listened in stunned silence. Mrs. Thompson advised them to stay away from the house and to always be cautious. That night, sleep was elusive. Every creak and groan of the house sent chills down their spines. The next morning, they vowed never to speak of the incident again, but the memory of the man in the kitchen stayed with them, a haunting reminder of their brush with the supernatural. The crisp autumn air was perfect for a campout, and 13-year-old Liam had invited his friends Noah and Ethan to spend the night in his backyard. Nestled against a dense forest, Liam's house offered the perfect mix of adventure and comfort. The boys set up a tent near the edge of the woods excited for a night of ghost stories and s'mores. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they gathered around a small fire pit, the flickering flames casting long shadows. They took turns telling ghost stories, each one more frightening than the last. The woods behind them seemed to come alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant animal calls, adding to the spooky atmosphere. "All right, I've got one more story," Noah said, leaning closer to the fire. "Have you guys heard about the Whispering Woods?" Ethan and Liam shook their heads, intrigued. "They say that these woods are haunted by the spirits of people who got lost and never made it out. If you listen closely, you can hear their whispers, guiding you deeper into the forest until you're lost forever." "Yeah, right," Ethan scoffed. "It's just a bunch of trees." "Want to bet?" Noah challenged. "Let's go in and see if we can hear anything." Liam hesitated. "My parents told me not to go into the woods at night. They said it's dangerous." "Come on, Liam," Noah urged. "It's just for a few minutes. We'll stay close to the edge." Reluctantly, Liam agreed, and the boys grabbed their flashlights and ventured into the forest. The towering trees soon swallowed them in darkness, the thick canopy blocking out the moonlight. They walked in silence, the crunch of leaves underfoot the only sound. After a few minutes, they stopped and listened. At first, there was nothing but the wind rustling the leaves. Then, faintly, they heard it, a soft whispering, like voices carried on the breeze. "Did you hear that?" Liam whispered, his voice barely audible. "Yeah," Ethan replied, his bravado fading. "Let's go back." But the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The boys turned to head back, only to realize they had lost their bearings. The trees all looked the same, and the path they thought they had taken was gone. Panic set in as they realized they were lost. The whispers seemed to be coming from all around them now, urging them deeper into the woods. Liam's flashlight flickered and then went out, plunging them into near darkness. "We need to stay calm," Noah said, trying to steady his voice. "Let's stick together and find our way back." As they moved, the whispers grew louder, almost as if the spirits were mocking them. The boys stumbled through the underbrush, their fear mounting with each passing minute. Suddenly, they saw a faint light ahead, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. "That must be the way out," Ethan exclaimed, running towards the light. But as they got closer, they realized it wasn't an exit. It was an old, abandoned cabin, its windows glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. The whispers were louder now, coming from within the cabin. "We shouldn't go in there," Liam said, his gut telling him this was a bad idea. But Noah, driven by curiosity and desperation, pushed open the door. Inside, the cabin was empty except for a single candle burning in the center of the room. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the whispers were almost deafening. "Hello?" Noah called out, his voice trembling. "Is anyone here?" The candle flickered and the whispers stopped abruptly. The silence was suffocating. Then, the door slammed shut behind them, and the candle went out, plunging them into darkness once again. "Guys, I don't like this," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "We need to get out of here." They fumbled for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers started again, louder and more menacing. Suddenly, the candle reignited, revealing a figure standing in the corner of the room. It was a man, or what was left of him, his eyes hollow and his face twisted in a grotesque smile. "Welcome," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. "I've been waiting for you." The boys screamed and pounded on the door, desperate to escape. The figure moved closer, his whispers filling their ears, drowning out their thoughts. Just when they thought all hope was lost, the door flew open, and they stumbled out into the forest. They ran as fast as they could, the whispers following them until they burst out of the woods and into Liam's backyard. They collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, their hearts pounding. Liam's parents, having returned home, rushed out to find them. They told their story, and Liam's parents, concerned but skeptical, called the police. An officer arrived and searched the woods, but found no cabin, no candle, and no trace of the figure they described. The boys never ventured into the woods again, and the whispers remained a chilling memory of the night when their sleepover turned into a nightmare. If you want to see more horror stories, check out my next video.